I'm Joni Brennan, President of the Digital ID and Council of Canada. It's my pleasure and honor to participate in the Payment Summit for 2022. What an exciting event. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the digital identity areas that are relevant to the payment system, the payments ecosystem, and we'll share 8 steps to help organizations to set their own digital identity strategy when navigating through choppy waters, which is something we've all been doing over the last couple of years. So let's get started. Now, if you're not familiar with us, we are the DIAC, and the DIAC is an adoption accelerator. This means we deliver resources like white papers, research, proofs of concepts, that all work to reduce uncertainty and help to add perspective, to inform investments, to inform strategies and tactics, and to inform people who are making decisions about digital identity, and ultimately those beneficiaries, customers, clients, who would be benefiting from digital identity. So we are an adoption accelerator. We are also what we call a trust framework provider. And what that means is we are an entity that is responsible for the development and compliance verification around an information assurance framework or an identity assurance framework. We'll talk more about what trust frameworks are as we go forward. And so what's so exciting about the work that I get to do, that I'm honored to do with our group, is we look at the pieces, the puzzle pieces of standards, policy and governance, technology, and in service to people ultimately, and designed around people, how we work together to work across those contexts to accelerate digital identity adoption and bring the tools together that will help to verify trust around services and solutions. DIAC really is a diverse community, and we're so proud to be Canada's voice of digital ID, our digital ID community focusing on these tough and exciting issues. So as we begin, we'll talk a little bit about what people think about digital ID. We've done full research in this space for 3 years, and so these are actually our most recent numbers. 4 in 5 Canadians feel that it's somewhat important or very important for federal and provincial governments to move forward to secure digital identity that works for all Canadians. And 2/3 of the Canadians that we've surveyed coast to coast to coast felt that a collaboration between the public and the private sectors is the best way forward. That will help to ensure that we have the right checks and balances and that identity works for everyone, everywhere, every time. 2/3 of those surveyed also felt that COVID-19 and the circumstances around it really made more important the need for digital identity to secure privacy, to empower Canadians with their use of data. So especially in transacting through the scenarios that we have been dealing with through COVID-19. And I think this is so interesting. In terms of demographics, we found that an average of 79% of what we might call caregivers, these are typically parents, someone with a senior, who's a senior caretaker, someone with a dependent in the home. These are the people that were most overwhelmingly interested in learning more about digital identity and the benefits that it could provide to them in their daily lives. Now, when we asked people what they thought about digital identity, what it meant, that's actually a challenge we need to work through. But nearly half of Canadians think that vaccine passports are a form of identity. They're more of a credential, but we'll talk more about that as we go forward. And then 8 in 10 Canadians, when they were explained, what do these words digital identity mean? Credentials, empowerment around access to data, being able to run your business remotely. When we explain these types of benefits, fraud reduction, 8 in 10 overwhelmingly supported the idea of moving forward with digital identity that would work for them and around their needs. Now, for the payments community, those who we surveyed, over half are extremely familiar or somewhat familiar with using a digital wallet. I'm in that category. And so 1 in 5 actually were completely unfamiliar with the idea of a digital wallet. 4 in 10 currently do use a digital wallet. And of those types of wallets, Apple Wallet came in with the highest rate of adoption. Now, my top line finding our top line finding that is so exciting, to me at least, is, well, we've had challenges to help just to notice that people understand intuitively what digital identity is and what it means. We did ask a question this year around personal data, and we asked Canadians, should they have access to personal data that's collected about them and issued about them? And overwhelmingly, 91% said they should have access to that data. They should be able to use that data when it comes to data that's issued and held by federal government and provincial governments. We've never seen 91% come back on a survey before. So that means emotionally and naturally they have an understanding about the importance of that kind of data and how they could potentially use it. That was followed really closely by the same agreement in terms of 86%. They felt 86% wanted to see that same access to data that was held and issued by the private sector. So let's look a little bit at the digital identity ecosystem and setting a strategy for it. In the past, the system was a bit more simple because it didn't really exist. And I like to pull up this older New Yorker 1993 circa, I believe, cartoon that said, on the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog. So, we could have our dogs out here doing transactions for us and no one on the other side would be the wiser. And probably when we're remote working from home, some of us may be doing this today. So the digital identity ecosystem of today, however, is quite complex, but don't take my word for it. This is a graphic that I pulled from 2018. So I think we've gotten even more complexity since then. This is a graphic from the One World Identity Organization, and they tried to kind of map different organizations and different activities. You can see how complex this was even back in 2018. So navigating this kind of complexity requires perspective, benefits from perspective. And that perspective will help us to reduce uncertainty, to guide strategies, and to build client trust, and ultimately to accelerate adoption. So let's get into our 8 steps about how you as an organization can start to look at your digital identity strategy if you're not doing so already. First, you should look at your digital identity themes. And what that means is, themes are our strategic direction, leadership decisions that we're making. We're thinking about particular elements and challenges and enablers around our customers and the value proposition for them. And if we say, hey, will we achieve our vision if we excel around this theme, then that's a theme that we should likely support. So think about your digital identity related themes in your organization, in the payment system, in the financial ecosystem. And we did the same for us as DIAC. And we came up with 4 primary themes. And this was identity versus identification. So this is the difference between taking a picture of a driver's license and having a driver's license that actually is a credential that has validation and technology built in, for example. Think about identity versus data. So I tend to think of identity as a subset of a larger data ecosystem. Thinking about data integrity, how we make sure that data is protected, confidential, and not tampered with along the way. And governance was important for our ecosystem. So we took these 4 themes and we put them into some X and Y axes, and we started to look at the different activities, the standards, the initiatives that are in our space, and we started to plot them around different types of organizations, from digitized identity to digital identity, whether they were identity focused or data focused, and kind of what kind of functions they were providing around authentication, authorization. So this helped us to kind of get a feel for the themes that are important for us, the DIAC, as an organization in this space. Now, you should then plan your digital ID scenarios. And so this is where you'll make assumptions about the future, uncertainties, different realities that your organization might need to evolve through. And building this set of assumptions-based scenarios will help your long-term organizational guidance when it comes to the digital ID methodologies and capabilities that you need to have in place for your organization and your customers. So we looked at scenarios and we came up with 4 scenarios. And so we're back to our dog on the internet. The first scenario is around platform identity. And these are the big giants: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. We have some form of identity through these organizations today, but in this scenario on the internet, still no one knows that you're a dog. The second scenario that we looked at was operator networks. And so these tend to be things like payment networks, credit card networks, telco networks. And these are usually trusted. They have strong rules, strong security. And so in this ecosystem that we're all familiar with and using today already as well, the idea is, how can you be a dog if you've got a bank account and a mobile phone? So we've got more assurance in that scenario for sure. Then we look at self-sovereign identity. And so this is one of the newer entrants from a model and a way forward on digital identity, a scenario. And in this ecosystem, you can actually share digital proofs and use things like digital wallets or containers as one methodology. And in this scenario, you might be able to prove that you actually are a dog because you have the digital proof to do so. And finally, the fourth scenario we looked at was open APIs. And so open APIs are all around us today as well. And these are kind of grabbing information about us as we're moving through our online experiences. And in this case, maybe we don't know if you're a dog, but we can tell that you really like doggy treats. So different ways of kind of verifying or understanding what a person's identity might be. So once you've gone through your scenarios, look at what your organization's digital identity roles might be. And that means mapping your organizational values and your capabilities to each of those digital identity scenarios that you just went through, and then identifying areas where your organization can influence progress. And so we did this for DIAC, and we have a number of requirements around participation, transparency. These are our values. And we worked through each of the 4 scenarios, and we mapped from high to low how much influence we had and where we thought that influence would be going forward. And what we learned was, from our view, we have the most ability to influence and make change around those operator network ecosystems and the self-sovereign identity ecosystems that are coming forward. So that helped us to guide where our attention might be best spent in terms of our strategy and our planning and our tactics. Now, on step 4 is to take your digital identity scenario challenges and list each of those challenges. And you could, against each scenario. So you might find that you have a challenge that is unique to a particular scenario. You might find that you have a challenge that repeats itself in the different scenarios that you came up with. That's okay. So now we look at our digital identity ecosystem common scenario challenges. And here's where we were able to group them together and understand where there's commonality. And what we saw here was there's commonality around creating the right market conditions to help digital identity move forward. And so one of the things we noted here was standards. There certainly are many. There are industry standards, national standards, international standards, and there's no singular way forward in this space yet, at least not today. So that creates some challenges for adoption and progress in the ecosystem. We also noted regulatory challenges. The federal or provincial government data that we mentioned earlier that could be very useful for Canadians to have in their power and their control. There may be some regulations that are preventing access to this kind of data. So this needs to be further reviewed. The second area was around promoting marketplace growth. And in this space, we see a common challenge around sustainability. Each of the 4 scenarios had challenges with regard to what's the right sustainability model? What are the right commercial models? Is a commercial model appropriate for that kind of ecosystem? So this is a space that needs more attention and more development to promote that market growth. And then, of course, inclusion. The last and the most important is making sure that in each of these scenarios and others as they come forward, that every Canadian will have the opportunity to participate. No one will be left behind, and we won't increase the divide for those that don't have access today. So these were our 2 common themes, are creating market conditions and promoting market growth that helped us to guide our strategy moving forward. Now, Step number 6, look at your relevant trust frameworks. And this means identify and determine which trust frameworks apply to you and the needs of your customers and your clients and investors. So what is a trust framework anyway, Joni? Well, trust frameworks help people to understand, can I really trust this verified person credential or this wallet or this network? Is the confidentiality protected, or do I need more assurance for this transaction? Trust frameworks, particularly identity trust frameworks, they focus on achieving desired outcomes of policies and regulations or contracts even. They give users and adopters flexibility to use the best approach that works for them today and have that common trust and assurance while delivering outcomes that are needed in the space and enabling for innovation. These trust frameworks can be developed for broad application or for a specific jurisdiction or industry. They can also guide seamless operation of an ecosystem that really, trust frameworks help to put policy, standards, and technology into practice. Now, you might also be wondering, what's the difference between a framework and a standard? Well, a standard it documents a single method of doing something. A standard is often purposely so rigid as a generally accepted single agreed method of doing something. So standards are about defining methodologies. A framework, however, defines a system or systems or an ecosystem, and a framework does not define the method itself. A framework is really a scheme that can be used for more operational trust, verification, and interoperability in very complex ecosystems. And a framework, it takes use case-based outcomes, but also allows for innovation within that ecosystem. So when we have an ecosystem that is complex as this, trust really will depend on assurance. And when we're in the financial and the payment space, that is assurance that it really is the verified person making that payment. If you need that verification, that you are dealing with that verified organization for that transaction, that credential, the information in the credential has been validated, and that the right privacy and notice and consent requirements have been met. Now, we have such a trust framework here in Canada. It's called the PanCanadian Trust Framework. This is an information assurance framework to guide ability to secure the verifiability of digital identity capabilities. And we'll take a quick step through it. We have some definitional and informative components to it. This really helps to ground you. What are our glossary and our terms that we're working through? And then we have areas that are what we call specified. And these are areas that can actually be verified by accredited information security auditors. These are your functionalities like authentication, notice and consent. Really exciting. We've just released a digital wallet component. So have a look at that if you have a chance. And all of these capabilities are encompassed by privacy, the number one priority that we must protect for all Canadians as this ecosystem moves forward. And we must empower them in this ecosystem as it moves forward. So the PanCanadian Trust Framework, if we kind of go back to our puzzle pieces that we started with, they take those standards, many exist in the space, they put it into a technology neutral requirements-based framework. They apply the right policy and governance control, all in the benefit and support of people to reduce their uncertainty, whether they're making decisions for organizations or whether they're your customers or your clients who would be using your systems and your services. Now, we're excited that we are launching the Voila Verified program. This is a program to do third-party assessment, conformance, and verification of organizations. So when they say, hey, we are PanCanadian Trust Framework verified, this is a program using third-party auditors that will actually verify that they have gone through the process and they have been validated as being PCTF approved. Now, step 7 in our strategy is to take your relevant, look at your ecosystem for your relevant digital identity entities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And these can be adoption accelerators, trust framework providers, standards groups. There are a lot in the organization. And some have areas of focus that vary and some may overlap. And when I think, for example, about Payments Canada are the deep knowledge payments organization. We look to them for guidance around payments. Whereas DIAC is a digital identity organization, and we help them with guidance on our deep work knowledge on digital identity. So there we go, overlapping and complementary ways forward for these kinds of organizations in this space. So in the ecosystem, we have a number of digital identity, what I would call digital identity specialists. These are organizations that work on digital identity all day, all night. This is just a snapshot of a few, not conclusive list, but these are organizations that are dedicated specifically to digital identity in the space. And then we have other organizations that are what I call more broad coverage. They're dealing with kind of all things digital, maybe lots of different kinds of standards or works that they're doing that are more broad in the digital space. Now, step number 8, the exciting part, set your digital identity strategic plan. Now, to set your plan, you will analyze the themes that you started with, your digital identity scenarios, what you see as your digital identity roles with your customers and your clients, the challenges that you've identified in those scenarios, those common challenges that are common across all of your scenarios that you've been able to group and see maybe where you should spend more time with your influence, which trust frameworks would apply to your community and help your community move forward, and what related entities you might want to consult with to help you move forward, to make those research and development or those product development dollars go further by working with organizations that have expertise in the space and can help you move ahead with their insights. Now, we took those 8 steps and we performed those within our DIAC organization, and we developed our 5-year strategic plan. We're actually in year 2 of operation of our strategic plan. So we've now delivered the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. We're iterating that and evolving that for the best of class and as innovation moves forward. And we're getting set to launch the Voila Verified program. So if you want to know more about that, you should get in touch with us. And we're continuing to develop and evolve the space and identify and address what the needs of the community are, and especially making sure that we're communicating and demonstrating the value of digital identity as a good, as a public good, to help inclusion and equity, and to ensure that everyone has access to the benefits of the digital economy and a digital society. So our 5-year plan is available on our website at DIACC.ca if you'd like to read it, and we're excited to be moving forward in this space. So we hope you learned a little bit about who we are as the DIAC, what Canadians are thinking about digital identity once they've been explained the benefits, what their interests are around wallets, for example, and the 8 steps that you can use in your organization to set your digital identity strategy going forward. If you'd like to speak with us to learn more, to share your use case with us or share your insights, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. We talk to organizations of all types, public and private sector. We hope that you have a wonderful payment summit. We know that there's an amazing agenda lined up. So we wish you happy learning for this year's Payment Summit 2022. Thank you.